We teach people to live by a guiding question. We say it's just simple to ask, what does love require of me in this situation?
Thanks for joining us today at Faith Ignited. I'm Executive Pastor Michael Bridges. I am with Aaron Shivington, our pastor at Faith Ignited. And Aaron, we love answering questions.
Yeah, and this one we got from our college group.
Okay.
We have a college group that meets, and one of our students wrote this for us. I think it's a great question. In fact, I've been asked this multiple times, so it was an easy one to answer because I've studied this a lot. But within my religious class, he writes, we've read through several Sumerian texts that spoke about a flood similar to the flood story of Noah in the Old Testament. How can I be sure the story of Noah is true, especially when there's so many other texts written date-wise before the Old Testament that also describe a disastrous flood?
So who were the Sumerians in the context of the Bible?
Yeah, so the Sumerians are from Samaria, and that's how they get the name Samaria.
Just north of Jerusalem.
Right. And so what you have is within ancient times, you have several different cultures. You have the Babylonians, you have the Assyrians, you have the Sumerians, you have all kinds of different tribes all around. You have the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Edomites, the Egyptians. So you got all these different groups of people, just like you do today. You might, at least in America, you'd say you have Ohioans and Indianans,
Yeah.
or again, you have people from Russia, Norway, Sweden. So again, all that's similar. But you had all these different people groups who all had within their history and religious thought a flood story. In fact, we can trace back and say, hey, there's about 123 similar but different flood stories. In fact, what's even more interesting is that almost every ancient civilization has a flood story. Now, you have a couple different ways you can go with this. You can go, everybody's crazy and everybody's wrong, or you can go, if everybody has a story that's similar, I bet that event actually happened.
Right, and it's really the same event. If there are differences, it's just being described differently.
Right. A way to think about it is do you remember the blizzard of '78?
I do.
Okay. How much snow was where you were at? Where were you at?
Over in Riverside, maybe 18 inches.
Okay, yeah, 18 inches. Yeah. Was it above your front steps or?
Yes.
Okay.
From wind. Yes, it was.
Do you have neighbors or people you know who had much more snow than that?
Some did. Yeah.
So I asked this question at our Bible study, with our adult Bible study on Wednesday. Now this is a very mature group, age-wise, right?
Yeah.
And so one guy was like, hey, I lived out in the country. We actually opened our second-story window because the snow had drifted that high.
So
Okay.
I might say I saw 18 inches of snow, and he might say he saw 18 feet of snow.
Right.
It was the same storm.
Right, and again, the point would be, as I went around that room, everybody had a little different variation of, yeah, there was a lot of snow, this is how much. This person said we actually shoveled snow into the garage so that we could get out of the garage to the cars. Because he's like, it was just covered, there was nowhere to go, so we shoveled the snow into the garage to get to the cars, which I thought, again, that's kind of funny to think about.
Yeah.
What I conclude from that isn't, hey, because everybody's details are a little different, there wasn't snow.
There was no blizzard.
Right. What I conclude is, hey, there must have been a really big snow around '78 that everybody who was alive there, at least in this geographical area, remembers.
Yes.
The same thing with the flood stories. Okay, now, so we conclude that if there's similar stories in all of the ancient peoples, there was probably an event that was historically true. The second argument that you get against the flood stories is, hey, archaeologists and people who study the stratosphere can't find a worldwide flood. Okay. What they can find, though, is a localized flood in the area of what's modern day Israel, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, all right? And
Near East, yeah.
the Near East, right? Where, guess what? Population started.
Yes.
Okay? And so when it says worldwide flood, it doesn't have to be worldwide if everybody in the world is in a geographic area. And they can historically trace back to within thousands of years of Noah because, again, nobody has the exact date of Noah or any of the other Sumerian texts. But hey, around this time period, All right, we can study the stratosphere and go, hey, there was a big, massive flood in this area that could have been capable of destroying everything that wasn't in a boat.
Right. And Aaron, and one thing I've heard you say before, science doesn't tell us anything. Scientists tell us what they know,
Right.
which may or may not be 100% accurate all the time.
Right, and again, there's no conflict between science and the Bible.
Right.
The stratosphere is saying there was a massive flood in this large, again, we're talking a very large area, like half the size of America, right? So in this geographic area, there was a massive flood that was in the biblical time period of Noah that could have been capable of killing everybody. So science is actually affirming what Scripture says. Okay? Now, another place that is important to go is when you study the Sumerian text, the Babylonian text, the Egyptian text, all right, all these ancient texts, what you end up with is drastic different stories. In fact, most non-biblical texts are kind of exciting comic book-like, right? There's dragons and there's gods that are at war, and we slit open the sea demon, and out from the sea demon, it's not blood, but it's water that pours out, and that water floods the earth, and you have, of course, the tales of Gilgamesh and Beowulf, and you have all these stories that have, this is how creation happened, and then there was a big flood. But again, what we conclude from that, again, isn't, well, there wasn't a flood. We conclude that every culture within their religious creation context has a flood story.
Yeah.
Extremely similar to the Bible. Now, how do we get there? Well, if you read the Genesis account, you have Adam and Eve, you have the creation, you have Genesis 3, the fall, then you have Genesis 6 through 9 or so, and you have the story of Noah. The very next story is the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
The Tower of Babel, humanity gets together, they're going to build this tower, this statue, or this building up to God, and God says, I'm not letting this happen. Guess what he does? He splits the cultures,
Confuses the language.
and so what you have is everybody walks away speaking a different language, and what you see is everybody kind of beginning to make up their own religion.
So now we've got their own religion, we've got their own language, and why might not we have their own story?
Right, with a common shared memory
Yes.
of there was a flood. Well, how did the flood happen? Well, it was a God. Well, tell me how that happened. What's interesting is that the Genesis text, compared to the other 123, is actually very anticlimactic. It's just kind of like boring. It's like, and God caused the flood. What? There wasn't any fight. There wasn't any monsters. There weren't any other gods. There weren't any demons. No, God brought judgment upon the earth because people had been so corrupt. Oh, that's pretty boring. Let me go read one of the more exciting. Let me go to the comic book version. But the reality of it is, again, all those different stories at that time actually affirm the biblical text. Whether the Sumerian accounts, again, are written earlier because they were people who were writing earlier or not is irrelevant.
Yeah, I could have written my Blizzard of '78 story down a year later, and somebody else wrote it down 5 years later. It's still the same story.
Absolutely.
Of the same event.
Absolutely. So again, and all that does is just add more evidence to the affirmation, to the historical event that yes, there was a flood. So let me just go one more fun place whenever we talk about the flood and Noah's Ark that I think is important to go. And that is Ken Ham and the Ark down here. We're in Ohio, for those of you not watching us local.
In northern Kentucky.
In northern Kentucky, there's an Ark Museum, which is a pretty cool thing to be at. They built this, it's supposed to be the same size as the Ark, and they got cages and pens and stalls in there.
It is, I've been there. It's really cool.
And they've got animals that are, some of them are animatronic, and they're in there. But here's one of the places that, again, I just disagree with Ken Ham on. And again, it's a minor thing, but it leads to major issues later. In that Ark presentation, he has dinosaurs. There weren't any dinosaurs on the Ark. In fact, when someone asks me about it, I go, yes, he has dinosaurs, he has electricity, and he has a gift shop. None of those were on the Ark. Okay,
Right.
The dinosaurs, the electricity, and gift shop, none of those were on the Ark. And the reason this is important is because Ken Ham believes in young earth, and he tries to take the genealogies in the Bible and say, therefore, this is how old creation is. This is when the earth started. The problem is it doesn't line up with science. And so science says, hey, the earth's like 6+ million years ago, right? And I can't remember the number, but when you take the Bible, you get a very young earth that you go, okay, one of these is wrong. Well, here would be my issue with that. is that I don't think that the Bible is wrong, nor do I think science is wrong there. I think that we're reading incorrectly. And so one of the ways that we understand that is jump all the way back to the creation story. And we've talked about this a little bit before, that word day that's used in the creation story. You know, on the first day, God created, ... right? Well, that word day can be 11 different meanings in Hebrew. Okay? And so you might say, the other day. Which day are we talking about? Like 2 days ago?
Yeah.
When I say the other day, my kids will laugh because they're like last year, Dad? Like, what are we talking about, right? Or you may say, hey, in a couple days. Well, you put 2 in there, a couple, but again, how far out does that mean?
So context is huge.
Context is huge, and again, this is where understanding a little bit of the language. There's 11 different words at Hebrew, that word day, there's 11 different ways you can interpret that word. 7 of them fit, okay? And it could be anywhere between day as in just a period of time, to day thousands of years, to day, yes, a literal 24 hours. Now, here would be my most logical argument. The sun isn't created till day 4. How do you have a 24-hour day without the earth revolving around the sun?
Yeah.
Now, certainly God can sit up there and say, hey, I'm going to create a 24-hour watch and watch this happen and use that word day. But again, the Genesis story is not meant to be a scientific. It's meant to be an explanation for how things happen to a people who are leaving Egypt, who are still trying to figure out, did the Egyptian gods create, or
Right.
was there another account that makes much more sense? And Moses is writing saying, no, there's only one God. He created all things. Let me tell you how he did it. It's not, let me give you a scientific explanation. And so I think we do a disservice to our fellow Christians who now are encountering someone and they're like, so were there dinosaurs on the ark? Because again, it just doesn't work with science. Well, now we pit science and the Bible against each other, and quite honestly, we as Christians look really stupid. There's no need for that. Because again, if you go to the Genesis account, the day 1, which has no sun for the earth to revolve around, could be 1,000,000 years.
1,000,000 years long, right? Because time only existed when God created it.
Right.
God created before time. We talk about spending eternity with God. Eternity doesn't have time.
Right.
There's no time there. So what we see as creation and the time associated with it is something when God started the chronological order of time, and he will one day end it.
Right.
But his existence was forever before that. It will be forever after that. He can do with time whatever he wants. Aaron.
Right. So let me close with this. Ken Ham and Ark enthusiast, I love what you've done because you've created conversations, right? And really, at the end of the day, I hope that what we walk away with is, hey, Ken's actually invited us to think critically about the Bible and about science. I don't agree with his approach at Young Earth, right? We're both going to get to see Jesus. We're both going to hang out with Jesus. I just think he puts logical obstacles in front of people who go, I'm starting with science and moving to the Bible, that don't need to be there. Because the earth doesn't have to be as young as, again, the 24-hour day periods in Genesis and then the genealogy that's in Scripture. And so when I read the story of Noah, and I think of Ken Ham's Ark, and there's dinosaurs in it, I just scratch my head and go, man, there weren't dinosaurs, there wasn't electricity, there wasn't a coffee and gift shop in the Ark either. Right? Besides that, it's a pretty good experience that I think is worth going to.
It is. So Aaron, when we have differences of opinion, or even differences of doctrine within the church, they're kind of a beautiful thing because they make us dig deeper into Scripture ourselves to understand them and to form our opinion, and not only to defend our opinion. Sometimes we have an opinion, we dig into Scripture, we change our opinion because Scripture is revealed to us in a different way.
Absolutely.
So there's nothing wrong with all of us taking different looks at something and trying to understand God. You know, that's a wonderful thing. Theology is faith seeking understanding.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Aaron, thank you.
Thank you.
Great question, great answer. Thanks for joining us here at Faith Ignited. Check us out on our website at faithignited.church, also our YouTube and Facebook channels like those, and join us at Faith Ignited some Sunday at Fairborn and Xenia. Thanks, everyone.